Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first Real Talk. This is the first event of the kind, and we decided to arrange this Real Talk here at Smart because we noticed that there is a gap between IT and communications, which can sometimes cause issues when getting new software. So we wanted to invite two high-level executives to teach us to bridge that gap and build successful partnership between the two functions. So we are very lucky to get Yogesh and Brett here. And before we start, we like to ask all the participants in the audience to comment in the questions tab what city or country where they're tuning in from. It's just very interesting for us to see the kind of audience we have and get to know you guys better. So please drop a comment in the questions tab. And while you're doing that, I can see already first answers coming in. There's Germany, France, Finland. So far we have Europe online. Let's see who else joins. And for now, let's present our speakers. Yogesh, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Very nice to be here, and where the place I am, Amsterdam, is so it's getting good evening. So let's start with that. My name Yogesh Malik. I have been in the telecom industry. My wife is from Czech Republic, and we have two very beautiful and growing and handsome sons, one born in Norway and one in India. So it's kind of a diverse family, and we are based out of Amsterdam. So that's one. I have to say I've got an opportunity to work in different markets. This is my 11th country, actually, where I'm 11th city, where I'm installed in, if you may. And I've learned a lot through the ranks, if you may. What really matters, not only to employees, but to the customers. And I hope I can share some of that with you today.
I'm sure you can. The intro call we had was so insightful that could be a webinar in itself. Thank you so much, Yogesh. Brett, could you kindly introduce yourself too?
Sure, Anita. My name is Brad Whitworth. I've been doing communications most of my career in Northern California, Silicon Valley. So working for companies like HP and Cisco, Hitachi, PeopleSoft. So much of my life has been spent in companies where the product and the service is based around IT. So I have a little bit more familiarity, though I've been living in the communications side of things. I lived in the center of Silicon Valley for most of my career here, but a few years ago moved to a place called Windsor, not Windsor as in Ontario, not Windsor as in the UK, it's Windsor, California, which is about an hour north of San Francisco, and it's in the heart of wine country. So a little bit early to be drinking wine in the morning here, but there is a small vineyard in our property, and I'm, in addition to learning about communications and learning how IT and IC can get along, I'm learning about grapes and growing and all sorts of fun things there. And Yogesh, I've got two sons who are older, so enjoy them while they're still around the household. They're out of the house and off of the corporate payroll, so there will be a day when they'll be paying for things for you instead of the other way around. But I love this idea of us being able to share some sort of insights as to where communications and IT have come from, where we are, and where we might be going.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Brett. And my name is Anita. I'm content marketing manager at Smart, and I actually have a background in communications myself. So I know from experience how hard it can be to reach employees with your messages. That's why I was so drawn to Smart, and we are employee communications and advocacy platform, and we help our customers to reach employees with targeted communications. And I'm really happy to see all the comments. We have people from South Africa, from Poland, from Mexico, Kenya, Romania. So from all over the world. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy this webinar. A few housekeeping issues, sorry. We will have 5 points to consider for building a successful partnership between comms and IT. Presented today, and we will do live Q&A throughout the session. So feel free to post your question in the questions tab on the right-hand side, and we will pick them up as we go. And if there is time at the end, we will also have We'll also have the Q&A at the end. So the first point we're going to talk about today is partner with IT to enhance your comms tool stack. And we wanted to bring this up because we noticed that there is a tendency to engage IT quite late in the game. So basically, like, for example, in the marketing or communications functions, we know what we want from software. We look for, we research the market, we talk to vendors, we choose something, and then we come to IT and ask them to install it. And they might have a different opinion of what software would actually work for this particular purpose. So we would benefit much better from getting them on board early on. So Yogesh, could you kindly open the discussion? How can getting IT on board help comms function reach better results with their software?
I was thinking about this, and I would like to make it simple. And in my view, you cannot describe, or if the kid cannot describe to you, or you cannot describe to your kid, you have failed. So, and the simplest way I could think about is you want to install something new in your house, and you're very encouraged. You just bought a new coffee machine. You ordered a new kitchen. You ordered a new TV, and you want to make that work overnight very fast, and you just do not want any interruption. And then you come back and say, okay, I installed, I got the service guy, everything is covered, but the thing doesn't work. And then you, of course, get annoyed because you just paid for it. So I think there is, in my view, there is no better analogy, which I have been living through while going through the reconstruction of a property, that when you want to do an installation, understand the plumbing. If you do not understand plumbing, do not surface on the top and expect things will be plug and play all the time. So I think it's very important in a way to understand that the modern generation doesn't have time, want everything instant, want not even today, right now, and want it not to work, but to work with full integration everywhere. And IT and comm stack absolutely is a clear, similar analogy in my view, where you kind of put in something and you need to make it work with what you have on the base. So I think that's the way I would say, and I'd like to hear what Brad thinks about it.
Well, I think the other interesting thing is the starting point for both organizations. We had the same audience and the same goal, which was to make our employees more productive. But we, for the longest time, didn't need to collaborate. Communications people could write their stuff, they could print their stuff, whether it was a notice board with a magazine that was being printed at a publication, a newspaper, we could deliver this stuff. But our worlds have been coming together over time. And this is over decades. We've learned that we needed things like email to be able to get things out there. When we come to a town hall, we need that infrastructure to be able to do things today. But at the same time, I think you're absolutely right. We haven't spent enough time as communications people understanding IT well enough to be true partners in things. It's almost as if Christmas is coming and we write our little wish list and give it to St. Nicholas at the last possible minute and hope that when we wake up in the morning, it'll all be there and it's going to be working fine. So I agree with you completely. We need to probably find ways to be able to partner earlier, understand one another's needs. And I think you're absolutely right. The other piece that I think communications people, besides being sort of last minute, we've always been deadline focused. It's like let's hurry up. We need to get this out quickly. And we expect that sort of service everywhere. And we've been spoiled when we have these little tools at our disposal where, I can go and download an app now. Why can't we do that here in this environment? Why are you giving me, from an IT standpoint, I come to a corporation and I have this like antique computer and I've got something much more powerful at home. You were giving me a BlackBerry to use as the IT device of choice for people, and when everybody else has smarter phones. And so I think we as communications people have a lot of growing up to do to be able to understand.
Yeah, on that note, I remember how Yogesh also brought up in our previous call that like we just don't realize how important it is to have all the connectors and how actually difficult it can be for IT function to ensure that like even the basic things are provided for the entire organization. And I must say, this was like a revelation to me. I did not think about it that much, but it's actually hard work to keep this all up to date, work with all our tools. And yeah, there's a lot of work put into that. And I must say that your analogy about plumbing, Yogesh, hit very close to home. I'm doing bathroom renovation now, and I don't understand anything about plumbing, so I'm really suffering. So this was almost painful for me to hear.
No, it's also there's another aspect to the whole thing. As we move generations, and I think Apple is facing that with iPhone, people are still holding on to iPhone 6 and 7. There are messengers which are still there with the older version. How do you keep all the generations running? How do you give new functionalities? And how do you get employees, participants, to the best level of information consistently and in a sustainable manner? And I think that is an effort which needs extreme teamwork and empathetic understanding on both sides, and kind of growing up together, if you may, because you cannot just switch off something. You need to live with it, and you need to grow into the new, and the old also kind of visibly fades away, but in a good way. It's the forced switch off, in my view, creates a big anxiety in a lot of user base. But I'm totally open. I think these are the challenges which the current environment is facing right now in different units in different countries, different areas.
Well, I think it also varies, as you're pointing out, sort of from region to region. Also, industries change quite a bit, and sort of the needs for IT and how integrated it is for the organization are very, very different depending upon the kind of an organization you work for. So there's sort of that layered in. I think the other piece that I would take from this, I mean, it says partner with IT, but I think it's partner early with IT and go with an intense curiosity. As communications people, we're taught to ask questions, we're taught to be inquisitive and to learn. And I think we need to spend more time understanding our partners, what's driving them. I think the other one that is sort of interesting is how is success measured in IT? How are you being held accountable to your bosses? And the flip side is, does IT understand how we're being measured and what our accountability is and what our needs are? And then look for those intersections as opposed to the separate unions of things. How are these two organizations reliant upon one another? Because I don't think we spend enough time in sort of in the long haul focused on that. You have priorities, and communications usually isn't at the top of the list, and communications people usually, IT has not been at the top of the list, but it's a partnership that does have to I think become even more important in the years going forward.
I totally agree. And I think one can look at a marriage. The husband may think he's independent of the wife and has his own career, and wife may think the same, but actually they are extremely dependent. And in today's world, actually, communications is key because absorption is coming at its own pace. Absorption is not coming as a broadcast all the time, though there is an element of broadcast, but absorption, people do it at the time they feel easy, where they feel they can absorb, where they have this mind space to absorb. And so that communication to the employees, communication to stakeholders, communication to customers is so key going forward. And it needs to happen though instantly, yet be available for absorption at a continuous phase. And for that, integration cannot be just at the surface. Integration needs to go all the way deep down. And hence, I bring the aspect of plumbing and the aspect of sustainable data compatibility, so that we don't have a message coming from one platform and then other platforms giving different messages.
I think there is also some common ground that the two organizations have had. I mean, we talked a little bit or mentioned that our audience, our primary audience, usually customers, is the same. And I think the other piece is that historically, both IT and internal communications have focused on, I'll call it the one-size-fits-all approach. It's a whole lot easier to manage a giant IT infrastructure if there's a certain sameness, that everybody's running the same sort of software, everybody's on the same platform, everybody's at the same stage. But I think the flip side of that is, and communications people were the same, we were lucky enough to have a budget to be able to do sort of a one-size-fits-all communications. But what we've learned is that our audiences are very, very different, that even within an organization, you may have little pockets that have different needs and different information needs and probably different compute needs as well. And what we've also needed to realize is that then individuals have different needs and wants, and it's sort of what you were talking about, Yogesh, too, in terms of that sort of the adoption rate. I mean, if you look at some of the writing by Jeffrey Moore about crossing the chasm, you have the early adopters and sort of the main crowd, sort of like a bell-shaped curve, and there's some people who want to get that first technology. There are people who are willing to camp out overnight to have that very, very first phone coming from whatever manufacturer of choice that you really like. But then there are also the laggards who, after it's safe and after it's proven and after it's all been tested, then I might be willing to look at it and bring it into my shop, bring it into my house, add it to. So you sort of got these individuals who have a very, very different interest level in embracing, using, and trying technology. There are people who actually sign up to be beta testers. I'm one of those.
We actually have a question here
Please.
in the audience. Does IT care more about what the enhancement is, the value it adds to the tech stack, and in this case to the employee experience, or how it works, how easy it is to implement and maintain?
Well, it really depends, because to the earlier point of discussion, if the involvement is much before, if explanation is there and the purpose is there, there are different ways. New and old can be combined using a word called adapters. New and old can be combined using different algorithms on the database. So I think it really depends. But in my view, IT needs to embrace the new, and IT needs to be allowed to configure the old and maintain the new. And in this twilight zone, be extremely kind of supported, because in this twilight zone, some things are not going to be okay. And one needs to understand that and kind of go on with it. But I think that's the way I would at least frame that IT needs to move on.
Well, we need to understand from the IC side of things, I'll call it the procurement process, or what does it take to bring something new into the environment? Because you have to protect, in a sense, the house, make sure that it's running, make sure that everything's working. And if we're bringing something that doesn't meet the security needs that you have, if we're bringing in something that I'll say won't work because it's too much of a bandwidth hog. I keep thinking of things like our attempts to be able to move to broadcast capabilities and have a network that's extraordinarily robust. Lots of organizations just don't have the bandwidth. And I think that we've learned in this last year that when you try to implement some sort of video conferencing capability, that you find that people have echo and things move jiggy-jaggy all over the place because the infrastructure hasn't kept up with the demand from users. So we, as communications people, need to understand a little bit better, how do you go about assessing this stuff? How can we, instead of coming to at the last minute with we need one of these now, it's more we're looking at these sorts of things. What do you have in your shop? Here are some of the things that we're looking at. Here are some of our considerations. So I think this idea of partnering to be able to bring some of the tools that we see as essential to our role in communications now into that stack and make them work with everything from the HR database to that network to get out there. We have to have a little bit of understanding. I mean, I've been hanging around IT long enough. I will also admit a little bit of geekiness. This will give you a sense of how long I've been doing some of this stuff. When I was in college and took my first computer programming class, it was sitting down and doing an IBM key punch where we're actually producing the cards that got put in the stack to go run the program in the IT. So I've been sort of around the fringes of IT for quite some time and have seen the progress, but I know we in communications have a lot more that we can learn.
Yeah, let's maybe move on. Indeed, in the interest of time, I must say that the point you brought up now about understanding the tech ecosystem with a perspective of IT is something we are going to address in one of the next points. So very happy to hear it already now, so we can continue the discussion later. So our second talking point is the role of comms in adopting and managing new technology. And this one was very interesting for me personally to hear in one of our intro calls that Yogesh brought up that very often IT installs some new software, works very hard for it, but then nobody uses it. And it's like the most frustrating thing that can happen. So Brett, what do you think? How can communication functions support IT with adoption of new tools?
Well, just as I said, we as communications people need to get in early to understand more about what's going on the IT side of things. I think that IT could come to us a lot earlier with we are getting ready to move to this platform. We're getting ready to roll out this new technology. Can you help us in getting this thing out there? Because I think I've seen in multiple instances, IT sort of feels if they've tested it, put it up there, maybe had some small group of people, usually a lot of IT people using things, and it works. Then they can almost like wipe their hands clean and sort of say, okay, it's there, go have it, go use it. I think we need to get involved to be able to make sure that it's not just introduced, but it's actually adopted and used, because there's no sense adding the new technology to your stack if it's not in some ways, getting a good return on the investment for the entire organization. So I think communications people can play a keen role in partnering with IT to be able to make sure that people understand the benefits that new technology can bring, how it's used, where to go to get training on things, and meet those individual needs. I think the other piece is the tailoring, messages. Again, maybe a one-size-fits-all message doesn't work for a rollout of some new technology, even though it's now available worldwide or across your entire organization. We need to be able to help our IT friends say, it's a little bit more than that. I think we've always sort of fallen back to the oops, we'll send something out. My favorite has been in organizations where IT can send out messages to the world, and they're sending out messages saying, this system is down. This system is down. We're experiencing a problem, and they send the warning to everyone. Well, I don't even use that. So why do I really care that thing is down? We need to find ways to be able to target messages to our users and really focus on the technologies that are important to them in getting their jobs done. I think the same thing has been true on the IC side of things. What information do you need? But then we also need to, on the IT side of things, say what tools are important to you, what software, what technologies are important, and sort of help our partners in IT focus on the audiences that are most important to them.
Yeah,
I think it's such a big, if I think about ocean, there are 7 different oceans, but there's only one Mariana Trench. So knowing the depth of the plumbing is knowing Mariana Trench and the divers who can go there. There are very, very few of them. In every organization, there are very few people who understand that depth of where things really are. If they are involved in the transformation, if they are being involved as a part of the transformation, and if they are really there, I think things will be better. If you look at off-the-shelf, amazingly tested solutions like this one, which did not work well with one device, worked good with other device, has been tested with 1,000 devices. If you look at Google Meet, Zoom, MS Teams, others, I mean, they continuously keep doing testing again and again and again to make sure that every new software instance and replica is able to be compatible. So I think it's very important. Adoption can come when there is involvement at a very early stage, and involvement is there with a purpose. And that purpose needs to what would be better for the employees, what would be better for the customers, what would be better for the company, and how will that be taken forward further. I think that needs to be kept in mind.
It's really interesting reading some of the comments and questions that are coming in. It reminds me a little bit of years ago, there was almost this tug of war. Is it, does IC own communications, or does IT, who owns the intranet? And the answer is it's jointly owned. We're responsible in some place on the IC side of things for content, IT for making sure that, but does it belong under IT or does it belong under communications? And the answer is, if I'm the CEO, I really don't care as long as the thing works and is effective and is providing the information and the technology that our employees use to become more productive. So this is a perfect example of why it's so collaborative. It's so important to be collaborative on this stuff and understand where we're coming from. I also love Nico's comments about we should try to keep things simple, and that applies to both the IC and the IT side of the world. And I think that's a real struggle. I'm sure your life would be a lot simpler if there were fewer tools and fewer new things coming in that you would need to manage and integrate and make sure that they work. And IC is sort of the same thing too. When people come and say, "Oh, we need to start a new newsletter, we need to do this," it's like, no, wait, we've got a lot of stuff already going out there. Why can't we use the tools that we have? So there is this sort of battle of pushing back on things, but at the same time, you don't want to hold it so that you're not introducing new technology. So I think that it's a collaboration, it is a partnership, and it really is a place for discussion. And the fewer surprises that we have, the better. I don't want you coming to me on Friday saying, "Oh, guess what? We're turning this on Monday and everybody needs to start using it." And, the flip side is we don't want to come to you and say, "We need this new technology. It's for a town hall. The CEO wants it on Friday. Can you get us up and running? And we need this much more bandwidth." And you're going, "No." So earlier and deeper collaboration is probably the answer to a lot of the issues that we've been talking about.
Yeah, there is actually a question from Kelly on that note in the chat. She's asking, do you believe the role of change management should sit in IT or in comms? So,
I think it's a great question, and honestly, and there are different models. There's a model where change management sits independent, but in my view, change cannot happen if you do not have it imbibed deep in. And I think regardless of who orchestrates, which governance orchestrates, change just happens when there is a belief that there's a next level to be achieved. I think that's the way it works. And it's not less is, of course, no one would disturb. We could keep living life the way it is, but that is not the way it's happening. Every time there's a new handset, every time there's a new technology, every time there is a new application, every time there's a new game, there's a lot of modifications on compute and the edge. And I think as long as we understand we are living in a changing world, less is not going to be more, but we are going to focus on what makes difference and focus on a sustainable delivery from the side of the company, which is infrastructure in my view.
Well, and we've thrown huge challenges at you, I think, in this past year too, in terms of the infrastructure. The headquarters is now not one building or 12 buildings that you've had a chance to manage under the network. The company now is everybody's den and office and dining room and home office setup. There's been a march for the longest time too, instead of you providing all the technology to everybody across the organization. The whole bring your own device to work has put all sorts of new wrinkles into the challenge set of challenges facing IT. So I think I've seen tremendous growth, a tremendous sort of willingness to expand. And this is a time when, just like we in communications try to at least manage that communications environment, it becomes more difficult as an organization grows and expands and wants to do new things. And you face the same sets of challenges that communications people do.
Yeah, there's actually also another question from Joanna, but I'm thinking we can address it at a later point. So maybe now let's move on to the next point, and then we try to get back to this question a bit later. I think we'll partly answer it with one of our last points. So the next point is comp plus IT equals less business risk. And as we all know, security is a priority for all organizations nowadays, and nobody wants an information breach. So comms function also deals with a lot of personal information about employees. So Brett, what are the main challenges for people, for communications people, in making sure the data is protected and the personal data is secure?
Wow. I think it's a challenge too, because it's this balancing. I can remember working at an organization where the CEO would often say, I'm only going to share this with the people in the company, and I don't want you to share it any more broadly. And saying this on a town hall meeting to thousands of people around the world and expecting things to stay inside. Part of it is making it a piece of the culture to understand how information can be shared, how it can be used. What are the rules for data privacy, for security, for everything else? And it also will vary tremendously industry by industry. If you're in healthcare, there are all sorts of rules and regulations that guard patient privacy and personal information about their ailments. If you're in banking and finance, there are a whole set of things. Other industries are not quite as concerned about some of that stuff. They may be more concerned about product and technologies and intellectual property as sort of valuable process and information that needs to be guarded. But I think there's where communications can play a role in sort of helping amplify and helping understand and reinforce the culture that exists around information and how it's used. And some of that comes down to the tools, because it's one thing. Is it safe to add something to the network? What kinds of precautions do I have to put on my own personal device to make sure it's not putting the entire system at risk? I think the flip side of that too, and we've seen it in organizations, people bringing malware or something unguarded into the environment, and you can cripple an entire organization. I think teaching people also about IT is a big help. I think I would love to at some point either disable or teach people that reply all is usually not a good thing when there's a whole bunch of people on a list, because that can just clobber an email system. And I hate this, nobody should be doing reply all, and they send a message to everybody on the email system, and then it sort of amplifies and just gets crazy. I told people and just goes crazy. So communications and IT both get together to be able to make the most of the tools that we have and sort of protect the environment in which we all have to operate, because we're all sharing resources.
I would totally agree, and I would just add a couple of things. I think business is first. I think we keep talking about communications and IT. We should understand why does that particular company, why does that particular organization exist? Because there's a business. That business needs to be uplifted. There should be a strategy. Communications is a tool towards getting to a better place. IT is an enabler. And if they don't work together, you'll get a half of a result. There is no tug of war. I think then the tug of war is inside your own body, like one body, and you're large and small intestine are pulling each other, it doesn't really work. It doesn't work. You gotta think business, you gotta think sustainability, you gotta think strategy. And if you don't think like that, you'll come into the common conflict, where should one thing sit or the other? I think it needs to sit where it matters.
Yeah, there is actually a question just about that from Joanna in the chat. She's asking, what is the best practice for setting a digital workspace roadmap and strategy? Who should take lead while collaborating? IT, comms, somebody else? How to structure it to achieve tech synergy for employee experience? So a lot of difficult questions.
No, I think these are extremely relevant questions because this affects the daily life. And unfortunately, it's like if you take a lead, doesn't mean things don't go well. And I think that's the question. The question is, what does lead really mean? If comms takes a lead, they have to involve. If IT takes a lead, they have to involve. And I think without involvement, without critical deliveries, and without a roadmap and a calendar, it would be very hard to just say one is leading and the other one is following, but the destination is not reached.
Yeah.
And I have seen both models work very well. I've seen both models, communication leading, IT supporting, and we met what we wanted to, and vice versa, where IT was leading, but in that sphere, and then communication took over. It's almost like a relay race, and we have to understand that.
And sometimes it's also driven by the money. Hey, I've got the money in my budget to go out and procure this software. Let me add it to the system. And you're going, whoa, wait a minute. So does IT control the sort of the financial package? And then, there's sort of this whole, is IT charging different organizations for their service that they're providing, or do people, have the right to pay for things and bring things into? So there's sort of sometimes that little money tug of war, but you have to get back to, as Yogesh points out, it's the underlying business, and it's the partnership, and it's the not surprising one another with last minute ideas and requests and demands and other things. So, and I think the other piece is having a deep enough understanding of some of the problems. I mean, at an organization where I worked at one point, it was like that. I would love to bring this in to the organization. And I actually spent time with the CIO. We were on a plane ride together coming back from an event. And her explanation to me was, I would love to be able to give you that technology. However, the software that we are running right now, the platform, is one that is approaching end of life. We need to do a major upgrade before we can even think about bringing that into this stack, because if we bring that in, one is it won't give you the functionality that you want, and the second is it also could hurt other things going on. So just having that heart to heart, that understanding. It didn't matter whether I've got the money to pay for it or whether I absolutely need it. It's like there's a real world in which my wishes and desires have to fit. And it was nice to be able to have that conversation and have the relationship where you can realize that you're doing the right thing for the organization.
Yeah, I think this is a very nice bridge to our next point. And actually, we'll have a question from Kari in the chat how to get IT buy-in for internal communications tools. So I think it's a good time now to move to the next point. And we have more questions here. It's a very lively chat. Very nice to see. So we'll try to address them a bit later. But our next talking point is look at your tech ecosystem through CIO's eyes. And this is a very important one. Something a lot of external communications professionals are asking us about, how to build a business case for a chief information officer, how to look at the tech ecosystem and see, okay, this is the gap this new software will fill, and how do you address it? So Yogesh, how can you maybe share with us the magical words? How do you convince your CIO that this is the tool you need, and how do you build a case for that?
I think it's the purpose needs to be very clear. Why is that system being introduced? Is it just because it's a new trend? or is it going to create value? If that system is being introduced, what existing habits needs to be changed? Which means which existing system interfaces need to be addressed so that the system can not only be introduced but can scale in its adoption. Number three, for me, is about compatibility. Old system, whichever one, had data, was working. Employees could see their history, or customers could see their balance or stuff. Now new system comes in and we say now this is a new start, gone is gone, and water under the bridge. It doesn't work in this age. Compatibility is extremely key and it's demanded. Just look at any game people play online today, including all the youngsters, 10 years age and less. Fortnite, when they play, what are they worried about? Their skin. What are they worried about? Their progress. And if they want to change from Nintendo to something else, they want to keep that history together. If communication need to go into the heart and soul and go through the change, one needs to understand compatibility, understand what exists today, understand interworking, and once that is clear, I don't think that's that much a hassle. Maybe it depends on the specific situation, which I'm unable to comment right now. But in my view, if the purpose is clear and intention is clear, one understands architecture properly and understands the need of compatibility, then I think things should work out.
I
Yes.
think the other thing that I would love to see us do a little bit better job on the communication side, I sort of go back to our default tends to be a one size fits all. We are in charge of building the water cooler, the Rosetta Stone, or that's going to solve the needs for everyone across the organization. And I've always found that it makes sense sometimes to pilot projects, find a small subset of the organization. So instead of messing up the entire stack, let's find a group and a pilot group and try something for a little while and see if it has that merit, see if we're getting the returns, see if we're getting the adoption rates, what problems we might encounter before we try to roll this thing out across a much larger population. So I think on communications, we can come to IT with this, before we roll this out company-wide, which is what we need to do. Let's see how this fits and not necessarily, in putting that roadmap together, part of it is testing and piloting and trying before we reach that, yes, this is worthy of rolling out. So you're making the business case, but you're also not expecting instantaneous gratification, that Christmas morning, open the gift and the thing's up and running. So a little bit of sophistication on our part, a little bit of growing up, a little bit of patience as we find ways to bring things in and work together to make sure we're not screwing things up by wanting something that just doesn't work. I think the flip side of that is that we need to do a better job of explaining to our colleagues in IT why some things that might be a great, I'll call it a collaboration tool, are not necessarily a great communications tool. And some of the stuff that comes pre-packaged with whatever, operating system, flavor of the month, organization that most of this stuff belongs to, you would rather keep your world simpler by having fewer vendors and fewer things. And, they've got this and it does that sort of stuff. We need to be able to make a better case and saying, yes, but here's why software doesn't meet my needs for communications. It may be a great thing for doing that, but it doesn't do this. And I don't think that we sometimes in communications know the language, know the business issues that you're facing well enough to be able to have that conversation. So I applaud, I've been in organizations where there's usually somebody from IT who is the business partner with different organizations, and sort of like the part of their job is to understand what it is that we're doing. I think the flip side is true as well. We on communications need to find ways to, I want to say, embed someone, or at least make it their responsibility to understand IT the roadmap, where it's all going, because IT is under tremendous pressures to do that whole change management thing, that transformation, just like communications people are too.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, on this note, like you both mentioned, modernization and integrations and adoption. So Kaylee here has a question that addresses most of these issues. How do we juggle modernization and integration slash adoption if we keep searching for new ways to be successful and improve our processes in the name of modernization? How do we still encourage adoption of these processes? I can hear. I can hear
Oh,
you.
Yogesh?
There's some sound issue.
Can you hear
Maybe.
me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's happening today. Modernization without us driving from the inside is happening today. It's We have been driven to modernize. Now the question is, how fast and in which steps do we modernize? And if we can think through properly and collaborate, I think that modernization is going to yield much greater results because modernization is happening. 5G is coming everywhere. iPhone 12 is coming. Samsung foldable device is coming. New apps are coming every day, even apps to kind of have your daily routine in place or what have you. So I think modernization is all across. Digital ecosystems are building up. Data privacy is awareness is building up. So I think I think it's just a tide we need to keep up, otherwise we will be behind.
Are life cycles also shortening for things, Yogesh? I mean, before you
Absolutely,
used to be able to
absolutely.
drop something in and let it sit there and it was stable and everybody
No,
got to the same point, but now
very good point. Very
we're
good point.
changing all the time.
Life cycle, very good point. How many times do you upgrade your Mac nowadays?
I feel like all the
Compare.
time.
Exactly. And one shouldn't be scared. And each time it's 100 gigabytes, 128, what have you. There is enough. I think memory is there, compute is there, and upgrades are happening because there's so much modernization that you have to keep up pace with all the interfaces which are going around.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
and
that
I want to talk, sorry, about one thing about budget because I think it really budget, in my view, in my very, very humble opinion, is a reality, but a little bit excuse as well. You can plan things in advance. Planning doesn't need budget. Eh, Teamwork doesn't need budget. You have the organization. Architecture can be done. So, a lot of things can be done with the current state of any enterprise. The question comes when the purchasing happens and stuff. And if you line up all the events over 2 years of a company, I am sure you can find if hands are joined together and the purpose is clear, that should not be the biggest issue. If that is the biggest issue, then I think one needs to dig deeper.
Mm. So you think there are some underlying problems? It's not never the budget.
It's hard for me to comment, but in my not huge, I would say 2, 3 decade experience, it would be. But if budget is the issue, it would be like my son saying school fees would be an issue for him to study. If he doesn't have an intention to study, no matter which school you send him to, it doesn't work. You gotta be very sincere about what you want to achieve.
Yeah, actually, to finalize the point about looking at the tech ecosystem through CIO's eyes, there was a question from Joanna. How to get true buy-in from senior management? Then in many companies, these are people over 50, not so much into technology, not necessarily sharing the younger generation expectations. So I don't know, Brad, maybe you would like to start. What do you think about that?
Well, part of me goes, it doesn't necessarily, interest in technology and moving forward is not necessarily a function of age. That you have some people who embrace the new stuff at older ages, and also people who are reticent to embrace new things who could be younger. So first, it's not age related. Maybe I'm saying that because there's getting to be a little bit more gray on the side, and I still love new technology and new tools. I think the more important part is understanding how technology can help employees do their jobs a little bit more effectively. And I think that's where we find this common ground. And while IT is off doing this, this, and this, and we focus on this, 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 and I think we need to often come back to that. Why do we both exist in the organization? What are we doing? And it's really to give employees both the information they, well, I think it's getting them the information that they need to do their roles most effectively. And part of it is you've got platform, I've got content, but those two things are so intertwined today. And the content used to be the stuff that we in communications created and had to get out to everyone. The content now can come from anywhere in the organization. We have a lot in our business, we call it user-generated content, where it's this organization doing things. It's making sure, in my role in communications, I think, is making sure that communications environment is effective for everything from face-to-face communications, from town hall meetings, from that ability to blast messages out to everybody, to be able to hit people in the event of an emergency with the, can I reach them? Can they reach us? Do you have the technology infrastructure in place to be able to support those business needs, to be able to reach people, to make them effective in their roles? And that's where it is truly a partnership where they need us, we need them, because the organization needs both of us.
Yeah, Joanna agrees with you in the comments that it's not necessarily a function of age.
Yeah, I think there is a different aspect, if you may, regardless of where one is in the life cycle. I think COVID times have taught us that people are juggling amongst multiple priorities all the time. And how can people not be deprived of information which keeps their organizations going is key. And if there are tools and methods and processes to be able to do that, so that people don't get deprived of, oh, town hall, I didn't attend, what will happen? Yes, you can record. I don't want to watch the whole recording. Let's just so I think we gotta keep that in mind. Everyone has gotten up to speed that things are different, multitasking is happening, and information needs to be at hand, but at a pace where people can absorb at the speed.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. Now we have 8 minutes left, so let's move on to our last point. How can comms help IT ensure business continuity at all times? And I think business continuity has been a very painful kind of aspect in the last year when everyone switched to remote working and suddenly the systems were not working and you couldn't reach your colleagues so easily. And IT definitely had their hands full ensuring that remote work transition is smooth. So, Yogesh, how do you see the role of comms function in supporting that? How could a comms function help you ensure business continuity at all times?
See, I think the comms function is extremely critical because it is how to really talk to the hearts and minds of people, which channels to use, how to do that, in which rhythm. And I think to understand that is not hard. But once you go one level deeper, that's where the problem starts. So, in my view, if there is time to sit and plan and to see the things we discussed before, why new, what will happen to the old, how does the coexistence work, how does the fading work, and in which way will the compatibility work? I think things can work very, very fine. And without a strong communication, I think the company loses a lot. I think communications is absolutely key. Without a strong IT, you are unable to enable the strong communication. So I think that partnership, in my view, is key, especially in this age where there is remote working, digital interference in each and every type, where every sort of interference need to be properly handled. And I think that's the age we are living in. So business continuity, digital interference, and when it comes to compatibility, those should be the sort of the preface, if you may, one needs to deal with when comms and IT work together.
And I would add to that, I think communications people, when they go to IT, instead of asking for something, here's how you can help me, it almost, we need to turn the equation around more often than not and come back and sort of say, how can we help you? Because I think IT people for a long time were self-sufficient. They really didn't need us. They could change things and roll stuff out. And sometimes the changes that took place were under the hood, and it's that plumbing that we don't really need to know about or want to know about. The changes that were taking place in the infrastructure that if you upgraded from this to this overnight as a user, I didn't notice it anyway. But I think in the last year, certainly our lives have become a whole lot more closely entwined. The need for me to take a little bit more ownership and responsibility, both as an individual employee, but also as part of IC, for making sure that IT is effective, is incumbent upon all of us to sort of step up and maybe go in a place that isn't comfortable. I also sort of have said historically about communications people that we loved sort of that creative part of the world. The words and numbers and science and other stuff was not necessarily our comfort zone. And when we were on campus at university, few people took sort of that hard set of classes. They preferred more the liberal arts stuff. So I think for us as communications people, there's a call. Just as we need to go and understand a little bit more about finance, we understand a little bit more about business, we need to understand a little bit more about IT and its critical sort of role in the organization. And let's face it, as we've become less reliant on buildings in this last year, as what is the company? Oh, it's that place. Well, no, IT in the infrastructure is an important part of the organization, just as employees and culture. And if we couldn't do our job without you, and vice versa. So there's a partnership to be able to ensure that business continuity and make everyone more productive.
It's also absolutely, and in my view, it's also one should help really celebrate. So when things are achieved, communications can help make stars who really plumbed the whole thing and made it work. How that can go online and it can make a big difference. Now, so yes, I understand there are different sides of the equation, but when you combine them, you get the full equation, and I think that's where at least my head is at.
Yeah, I think it's a very nice ending to this webinar, talking about partnership and how we can work together. And Mike actually left a very nice comment that this webinar helps him get a better sense of how IT and IC communicate and what kind of language you use, and better like how to use it interchangeably. So I think that's also a very good takeaway for everyone in the audience, also to hear like Yogesh perspective and how you approach things, and then Brett's way of talking about tech ecosystem. So thank you very much. I will still ask you for some final remarks at the end. But before we do that, I would like to, unfortunately, we have to skip the Q&A. We don't have time for that anymore. But I would like to invite everyone to join our next online session. It's called Turn All Your Digital Channels into Employee Advocacy Platforms. And now you can see a banner on the screen. And if you click register now, don't worry, you will not leave the webinar. You will just open a different tab in your computer and you'll be able to register for our next webinar, which will be hosted by Alex, the host many of you are familiar with. And we hope it will help you with your employee advocacy efforts. Yes, and now I would like to ask Yogesh and Brett to share some final remarks. What is like what would be, if people would have to walk out of this webinar with one idea, what would it be? Brett, maybe you can start.
Now, I think that for the longest time in communications, often we've thought about sort of a campaign or a launch, one time, get something out, and our job is done. And while we can apply that to our friends in IT, and that's a baby step, that's just the beginning. I think instead we need to look at more things as a process, that a communications happens along a timeline, that you plant some initial seeds, you do things, but then you also have some follow-up. And I think we need to look at these streams of things and look at IT and introduction of technology as an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a launch. And yeah, there's sometimes a milestone that you would celebrate, but we need to think of it more as an ongoing process in which you need to be involved sort of at all the steps along the way, as opposed to just being an occasional visitor to launch the news. So I guess the challenge I would put to my communications friends out there is find ways to embrace, embed, understand, support the IT function, because we can't do our jobs without IT.
Yeah. I would frame this phrase, we can do our job without IT. And so it is a constant reminder for all of us. Yogesh, what would be your final remarks?
No, I think Brad said it in a very good way. And it's not about one or the other, it's about the purpose. And the purpose is to lift the business, to engage the employees, to make a difference. So, yep. And as long as we understand the pain of both sides, one can work together. So, absolutely, no doubt.
Okay, thank you very much. So on your screen, you can see the contact information for our wonderful speakers in case you want to connect with them. And from all of us at Smart, thank you. We are the technology that addresses employee communication. So that's what we do, help employee communication through technology. So this webinar was like very relevant for us. So if you're interested in what Smart is doing, go check our website. And on this note, thank you very much, Brett and Yogesh. This was very insightful, and have a wonderful day, evening, whatever is ahead of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
all. Thanks.